In Love with Istanbul, a tale of three women. In the heart of Istanbul, the city's pulse beats beneath the rhythms of three lives: a tourist, a housewife, and a woman from the mountains. Their experiences, shaped by the same city, couldn't be more different. Each woman sees Istanbul through her own lens, shaped by her background, desires, and dreams. This narrative is proudly brought to you by Polly Speaks For You. At Polly Speaks For You, we are committed to empowering individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, through innovative text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You is more than just software. It's a tool for self-expression, connecting people with the world in meaningful ways. By blending the richness of history with cutting-edge technology, Polly Speaks For You demonstrates that every voice, whether preserving the past or shaping the future, has the potential to inspire. While we strive to make the story engaging, our primary focus is on storytelling itself. The visuals are secondary. We're showcasing the remarkable capabilities of text-to-speech software that bring these stories to life. The Tourist. Sarah stood on the Galata Bridge, her eyes wide with wonder as she gazed at the swirling Bosphorus. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the water and the domes of mosques that peppered the skyline. The call to prayer echoed through the air, a melody unfamiliar yet captivating. It was her first time in Istanbul, and she was utterly enchanted. Every corner revealed a new treasure: the glittering mosaics of the Hagia Sophia, the chaotic charm of the Grand Bazaar, and the scent of fresh simit wafting through the streets. For Sarah, Istanbul was a city of contrasts, a place where ancient history and modern life intertwined effortlessly. Her days were spent exploring, her nights filled with rooftop dinners overlooking the twinkling lights of the city. She felt alive, inspired by the rich culture and the warmth of its people. Istanbul, in her eyes, was a city of stories, waiting to be discovered. The housewife. Layla had lived her entire life in Istanbul. She knew its streets as well as she knew the lines on her hands. She could trace the path from her childhood home to the local market without a second thought, her steps guided by years of routine. To her, Istanbul wasn't just a city. It was her home, her roots, her comfort. But life in the city wasn't always easy. Layla balanced the demands of her household, cooking, cleaning, raising children, with the noise and hustle of the bustling metropolis. The constant stream of people, the traffic, the endless construction, it all weighed heavily on her. The Istanbul she knew was not the romantic city that tourists like Sarah saw. It was a place of hard work, of managing life day by day. Yet, despite the challenges, Layla loved her city. She loved the small moments: sipping tea with her neighbors, the aroma of bread baking in the early morning, the way the Bosphorus sparkled in the early light. For her, Istanbul was about family, tradition, and resilience. The woman from the village. Ayla visited Istanbul only once or twice a year. She came down from the mountains, where her village nestled among the rolling hills, to visit family and sell produce in the city's markets. The first time she saw Istanbul, it overwhelmed her. The sheer size of it, the crowds, the noise. It was a world so different from her quiet village. To Ayla, Istanbul was like a distant dream, both fascinating and intimidating. She marveled at the towering buildings, the luxury stores, and the fast pace of city life. But she couldn't imagine living there. The mountains were her home, the fresh air, the wide open spaces, and the simple life. She preferred the stillness of the hills to the constant motion of the city. Yet, each time she visited, a small part of her heart softened toward Istanbul. She found beauty in the chaos, in the mix of people, in the sound of the seagulls calling above the Bosphorus. The city was a place of opportunity, of possibility, a world so different from her own. Still, at the end of every visit, she longed to return to her mountains, to the life she understood. Three women, one city. Istanbul had woven itself into the lives of these three women in different ways. For Sarah, it was a romantic adventure, a city of discovery and inspiration. For Layla, it was a familiar landscape, one filled with both challenges and comforts. For Isla, it was a place of wonder, but one that remained foreign to her simple, rural existence. And yet, despite their differences, Istanbul held a piece of each woman's heart. The city's magic lay in its ability to be so many things to so many people, a mosaic of experiences, dreams, and realities, bound together by the tides of the Bosphorus. In love with Istanbul, each woman found her own way to understand and embrace the city, shaping her life around its vibrant energy, whether she stayed for a lifetime, for a season, or for just a fleeting visit. In the heart of Istanbul, three women's lives intersect in the most unexpected of ways. Their paths, shaped by the same city, seem to ripple through time and space, bringing them together as they each experience the city through their unique perspectives. Sarah, the eager tourist; Layla, the seasoned housewife; and Ayla, the woman from the mountains. All three share a connection with Istanbul, though they see the city through entirely different lenses. Sarah, the tourist's dream. The soft morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of Sarah's hotel room, gently waking her to a new day in Istanbul. Her heart fluttered with excitement, just as it had every morning since she arrived. To her, this city was pure magic, a dream that had come to life with the hum of ferries crossing the Bosphorus, the call to prayer ringing out in harmony with the bustling streets below. Every alleyway beckoned to her with the promise of discovery, of history waiting to be unearthed. Today, she planned to explore the Sultanahmet district again, though she'd already been there twice in the past few days. The allure of the Hagia Sophia, with its soaring dome and ancient mosaics, was irresistible. She stood in awe beneath the great dome, feeling small in the presence of such grandeur, the centuries of history etched into every stone. Here, she felt connected to something bigger, something that transcended her life back home in London. Yet, it wasn't just the tourist attractions that captivated Sarah, it was the life of the city itself. She found herself lost in the smells and sounds of the Grand Bazaar, bargaining with shopkeepers for brightly colored scarves and handmade ceramics. The spice market intoxicated her with the scent of saffron, cinnamon, and roasted coffee. She tried every delicacy: sweet, syrupy baklava, fresh simit, grilled fish sandwiches served straight from the boats docked at the harbor. Istanbul was not just a destination, it was an experience, and Sarah soaked in every moment. But as the days passed, Sarah found herself yearning for something deeper than the picturesque sights. She wandered away from the crowds, exploring quieter neighborhoods where locals sipped tea in tiny cafes and children played in the streets. Here, Istanbul felt more real to her, more grounded. She imagined what it would be like to live here, to be a part of this city's pulse. It was a fleeting thought, but one that lingered as she continued her journey through the city's winding streets. Layla, the housewife's reality. Not far from where Sarah stood in awe of the city's beauty, Layla prepared breakfast in her small, sunlit kitchen. The clatter of dishes mixed with the distant sounds of the city waking up, a familiar symphony that played out every morning. She stirred a pot of tea on the stove, the smell of fresh bread and olives filling the room as her children rushed in, grabbing food before heading off to school. Layla loved her family deeply, but life in Istanbul had its challenges. The city had changed over the years, growing busier, noisier, more chaotic. She remembered a time when the streets were quieter, when there wasn't constant construction or the rush of people hurrying from one place to the next. Now, the city seemed to be moving too fast, and sometimes Layla felt like she could hardly keep up. Her days were spent tending to her family and household, balancing the demands of city life with her role as a mother and wife. She took pride in her home and the meals she prepared, but there were moments when the weight of it all felt overwhelming. The crowded markets, the rising costs of living, the relentless pace of life. At times, it felt like the city itself was pushing her to her limits. Yet, Istanbul was her home, and despite the challenges, there was beauty in its chaos. Layla found solace in the small moments, walking by the Bosphorus in the early morning before the crowds descended, sipping tea with her neighbors on their balconies. sharing stories that connected them to a past that seemed to slip further away with each passing year. Istanbul was in her blood. Its energy, its history, its rhythm flowed through her veins. Isla, the woman from the mountains. Far away in the mountains, Isla packed her bag with simple provisions: jars of homemade preserves, dried herbs, and woven blankets. Twice a year, she made the long journey from her village to Istanbul to visit family and sell her goods at the markets. Though she had made this trip many times before, the thought of entering the vast, overwhelming city still filled her with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The mountains were her sanctuary, the life she knew. There, everything moved at a slower pace. The sound of the wind in the trees, the gentle murmur of the river, the soft rustle of animals in the fields, these were the sounds that calmed her soul. In the mountains, life was simple, predictable, and peaceful. But Istanbul was an entirely different world. As the bus descended from the hills and the city's skyline came into view, Isla's breath caught in her throat. The sprawling expanse of the metropolis seemed endless, a place of towering buildings and relentless activity. She couldn't help but feel small, insignificant in the face of it all. Once in the city, Isla found herself disoriented by the noise, the traffic, and the sheer number of people. She marveled at the opulence of the shops and restaurants, the grandeur of the mosques and palaces. Yet, at the same time, she felt like an outsider, a village woman out of place in the world of concrete and glass. Still, there was something about Istanbul that called to her. Perhaps it was the history embedded in its stones, or the way the sun set over the Bosphorus, casting the city in hues of gold and rose. Or maybe it was the promise of opportunity, the sense that here, anything could happen. But even as she stood in awe of the city, Isla knew she would always return to her mountains. Istanbul might fascinate her, but the mountains were her home. The unexpected intersection. One afternoon, by chance, the lives of these three women crossed paths. Sarah, tired from a day of exploring, found herself in a quiet neighborhood cafe, one of the less touristy places she had come to love. She sipped her tea, watching the world go by, when Layla entered the cafe with her children. The housewife sat at a table next to Sarah, her eyes scanning the room before settling on the stranger beside her. Sarah smiled, a gesture that Layla returned, though it was hesitant. Not long after, Isla, fresh from the market, entered the cafe as well, seeking a moment of rest. She recognized Layla from years ago when she had visited the same market, and with a quiet nod, she approached her table. The three women sat in silence for a while, each wrapped in her own thoughts, until a gentle conversation began, a simple exchange about the weather, the tea, the city. As they spoke, they realized they each had a different relationship with Istanbul. For Sarah, the city was a place of beauty and discovery. For Layla, it was a place of routine and hard work. For Isla, it was a distant, chaotic world, both fascinating and intimidating. Yet, in that moment, they found common ground. They all loved Istanbul, in their own ways, and for different reasons. In the brief time they shared, they glimpsed the city through each other's eyes. Sarah saw the city's grit and reality through Layla's stories. Layla glimpsed the wonder and possibility that Sarah had found. And Isla felt, for the first time, that maybe the city wasn't so foreign after all. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the cafe's windows, the three women parted ways, each returning to their separate lives. But Istanbul had woven them together, even if just for a brief moment. They left the cafe with a deeper understanding, not only of the city, but of themselves, and of the ways this ancient, complex place had shaped their hearts. And so, they remained connected, three women in love with Istanbul, each carrying a piece of the city within her, each forever changed by the other's view of it. Letters, diary entries, and reminiscences. Sarah, a tourist's diary. June 15th. I can't believe I'm finally here. Istanbul has always been at the top of my bucket list, but standing here, feeling its pulse, is surreal. Yesterday, I walked through Sultanahmet, wandering in awe beneath the Hagia Sophia's dome. There's something almost magical about being surrounded by centuries of history. You can feel it in the air, in the stones beneath your feet. It's as if the past and the present exist together in one beautiful symphony. The scent of roasted chestnuts mingled with the call to prayer felt like a song to me. I found a small cafe near the Bosphorus today. I sat by the window, sipping Turkish tea, watching the ferries glide along the water. For a brief moment, I wondered if I could stay here forever, leave London behind, and call this place home. June 17th. Today was something else. I wandered beyond the tourist-heavy streets into the quieter neighborhoods. I found a bookshop tucked between old apartment buildings, dusty shelves overflowing with books in Turkish and English. The owner offered me a cup of tea, and we chatted for a while. It felt real, more genuine than the hurried conversations I've had in the bazaars. I'm starting to feel the weight of the city's stories pressing down on me. Istanbul is more than a destination. It's alive. Every corner I turn, there's something new to discover. But I feel like I'm only scratching the surface. What is it like to live here, day in and day out? I imagine it's different than the romanticized version I've crafted in my head. Layla, a letter to her sister. June 18th. Dearest Ice, I hope this letter finds you well. It's been a busy few weeks here, with the children finishing up school for the summer. I've hardly had time to sit down and write, but today I finally found a quiet moment to collect my thoughts. Istanbul is growing. Every day, it feels a little bit larger, a little bit noisier. When we were young, do you remember how different it was? We'd play in the narrow streets, and there weren't as many cars or people rushing past us. Now, it's hard to find a quiet place to catch your breath. The city is alive, Ice, but sometimes I wonder if it's too alive, if there's too much of it for one person to handle. The markets are busier than ever, but everything is more expensive these days. Even the simple things we used to buy for pennies now cost far more. I've been thinking of you in the village, how quiet and peaceful your life must be compared to mine. I can't even remember the last time I heard silence. Here, there is always something: traffic, construction, people calling out to one another. Istanbul is my home, and I love it dearly, but there are moments when I long for the quiet of our childhood. The children keep me busy, of course. They're growing so quickly. Mustafa is starting high school next year. Can you believe it? And little Eileen, well, she's not so little anymore. She's been helping me more and more around the house. It's a comfort, but at the same time, it reminds me of how much time has passed. Sometimes I look out at the city, and it feels like a different Istanbul than the one we grew up in. Write to me soon. Tell me how things are in the village. I miss you. With love. Layla. Isla, a reminiscence. From a conversation with her granddaughter. Istanbul, you ask? Oh, child, it's a place that both frightens and fascinates me. I remember the first time I went there. I must have been no older than you are now. The mountains were all I knew, our little village, the forests, the fields. We had never ventured far. But when your grandfather got sick and needed medicine, I had no choice but to make the journey. I'll never forget it. The moment I saw the city on the horizon, my heart began to race. Istanbul was like nothing I had ever seen. So big, so loud. The streets seemed to stretch on forever, full of people, cars, and noise. I couldn't make sense of it all. In the mountains, everything was familiar, every tree, every stone. But there, in Istanbul, I felt like a stranger in a world too large for me to understand. But I'll tell you something, despite all of that, despite my fear and my unease, there was something about that city that pulled me in. The mosques rising up to the sky, the sound of the sea, the way the city seemed to glow when the sun set over the Bosphorus. It was beautiful in its own way, a beauty that was different from the mountains, but just as real. Now, I only visit the city twice a year, to see your aunt and sell my goods at the market. And every time, I still feel that same mix of fear and awe. Istanbul has a way of making you feel both small and grand at the same time. You must visit it one day, but remember this: it is not the mountains. The city will challenge you, it will overwhelm you, but it will also open your eyes in ways you can't even imagine. Sarah's final diary entry. June 25th. Istanbul has become a part of me. It's funny how quickly a place can change you. At first, I was overwhelmed by the grandeur, the history, the sheer vastness of it all. But now, I feel connected to the life that pulses through this city. Today, I met two women at a small cafe tucked away from the busy streets. We sat next to each other by chance, but we ended up talking for hours. Layla, a housewife who has lived here all her life, told me about the challenges of raising a family in such a fast-paced city. Her stories grounded me. They reminded me that while I see Istanbul through the eyes of a visitor, there are people like her who live its reality every day. Then there was Ayla, a woman from the mountains who only visits Istanbul a couple of times a year. She seemed so calm, so centered, but I could tell that the city both fascinated and intimidated her. It was strange. We were all so different, yet we shared something in common. Istanbul has shaped each of us in different ways, but in the end, it's the same city we all love. As I prepare to leave, I wonder if I'll ever feel this connected to a place again. Istanbul is not perfect, but it has a soul, and that's what I'll miss the most. It's not just the sights or the food or the history, it's the people, the stories, the lives that intersect here every day. I'll carry this city with me, no matter where I go next. Layla's Journal, June 26th. I met a tourist today. Her name was Sarah, and she reminded me of what it felt like to see this city with fresh eyes. She was full of wonder, talking about the beauty of the mosques, the energy of the bazaars. I couldn't help but smile. She sees Istanbul the way I used to see it, when I was younger. But there's another side to this city, one that she hasn't yet experienced. It's not always beautiful. It's crowded, expensive, and exhausting. But listening to her speak, I was reminded that there's still magic here, even after all these years. Maybe I've forgotten that because I'm so caught up in the routine of daily life. And then there was Ayla, the woman from the mountains. She visits Istanbul every so often, but her heart belongs to the mountains. I can understand that. Sometimes I long for simplicity too, but this is my home, and despite everything, I wouldn't trade it for anywhere else. Istanbul has a way of holding on to you, even when you think you want to leave. Perhaps that's the beauty of it. This city is a part of us, just as we are a part of it. Ayla's letter to her daughter, July 1st. My dearest Elif, I have returned from Istanbul. The city was, as always, overwhelming and beautiful in its own way. The markets were crowded, and I sold more than I expected. The money will help us through the winter. I met two women at a cafe, Layla, who has lived in Istanbul all her life, and Sarah, a tourist from England. They both see the city so differently. Sarah, with her bright eyes and excitement, made me remember my first journey to Istanbul all those years ago. She loves the city the way a child loves a new toy, full of excitement and curiosity. Layla, on the other hand, loves the city's daily life. I could see the tiredness in her eyes, the way she spoke about how fast everything moves. Yet she also loves it in a way that only someone who has lived here their whole life can. I admire her strength. As for me, I am glad to be back in the mountains. Istanbul is a place of wonder, but it is not my home. I feel at peace here, among the trees and the quiet. But still, I carry a piece of the city with me, as I always do. All my love, Mother. If you're enjoying this story, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating content that educates and empowers. To learn more about South Africa's leading accessibility software and to support our dyslexic-friendly initiative, visit www.paulaspeaks4u.co.za. Thank you for watching.